Emma sat in her small flat above the bakery, staring at the rain trickling down her window. The droplets ran down the glass like tiny rivers, each one reminding her of the tears she had cried so many years ago. 10 years had passed since her best friend left town. 10 long years of wondering what happened to James. She pressed her face against the cold window and watched the people below hurrying through the wet streets with their umbrellas and coats. Everyone seemed to have somewhere important to go, someone important to meet. Emma felt the familiar ache of loneliness settle in her chest like a heavy stone. Her flat was small but cozy. She had decorated it with books and plants, trying to make it feel like home. But it never quite felt complete. There was always something missing, someone missing. The empty chair at her small kitchen table reminded her every day of the friend who used to sit there, drinking tea and laughing at silly jokes. Emma worked at the local library now, surrounded by thousands of stories, but living very little of her own. She loved her job helping children find their favorite books and teaching elderly people how to use the computers. But when the library closed each evening, she would walk home alone through the quiet village streets. Every day felt exactly the same. She would wake up at 7 in the morning, make herself a cup of tea, and eat toast with jam while reading the local newspaper. Then she would walk the 10 minutes to the library and lock the heavy wooden doors and spend her day organizing books and helping visitors. After work, she would buy groceries from the small shop next door, cook dinner for one, and spend the evening reading or watching television until she fell asleep. She had built walls round her heart after James disappeared. Without a word, Emma remembered the last day she saw him like it was yesterday. They had been 18 years old, full of dreams and plans for the future. They were going to travel the world together. Maybe go to university in the same city and stay best friends forever. But the next morning, James was gone. His family had moved away in the night, leaving no forwarding address, no phone number, no explanation. Emma had tried everything to find him. She asked all their mutual friends, visited his old school, even wrote letters to universities in case he had enrolled somewhere. But it was as if James had vanished from the earth completely. After 2 years of searching and hoping, Emma finally accepted that her best friend was gone forever. The pain had changed her. She became careful with her heart, keeping people at a safe distance. She made acquaintances, but not close friends. She went on a few dates over the years, but never let anyone get too close. The fear of being abandoned again was too strong, too real. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Emma had finished her work at the library and was walking home through the village centre when the rain began to fall. She pulled her coat tighter round her shoulders and quickened her pace. But as she passed the small cafe near the old stone church, something made her stop. This cafe had been special to her and James. They had spent countless hours there during their teenagers, sharing hot chocolate and planning their futures. They would sit in the corner booth by the window, doing homework together or just talking about everything and nothing. Emma had avoided this place for years because the memories were too painful. But tonight, something drew her toward the warm, yellow light spilling out onto the wet pavement. Maybe it was the cold rain. Or maybe it was the loneliness that had been growing stronger each day. Whatever the reason, Emma found herself pushing open the heavy glass door. The familiar smell of coffee and fresh bread filled her nostrils. The cafe looked almost exactly the same as it had 10 years ago. Same red and white checkered tablecloths, same old wooden chairs, same photographs of the village hanging on the walls. Emma felt like she had stepped back in time. She was about to order a tea and find a quiet table when her eyes were drawn to the corner booth. There, sitting with his back to her, was a man with familiar brown hair. Emma's heart began to race. She told herself she was being silly, that it couldn't possibly be him. But something about the way he held his shoulders, the way his hair curled at the back of his neck, made her take a step closer. "James," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the quiet chatter of other customers. The man looked up from his teacup, and Emma's world tilted on its axis. His face was older now, marked by years of hardship she could only imagine. His clothes were worn and simple, and his hands looked rough from hard work. But those eyes, those gentle brown eyes that had been her anchor during so many childhood storms, those were definitely his eyes. Time seemed to stop. The other customers, the rain against the windows, the soft music playing in the background, everything faded away except for this moment, this impossible reunion. "Hello, Emma," James said quietly, his voice deeper than she remembered, but still warm and familiar. "I know I have a lot to explain." The next morning, Emma woke up feeling like she had been living in a dream. Had she really seen James at the cafe? Had he really been sitting there, older and worn, but unmistakably him? She touched the business card he had given her with his phone number written in his familiar handwriting. It was real. He was real. Emma called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. She could not concentrate on organizing books or helping library visitors when her mind was spinning with questions and emotions. She spent the morning pacing round her small flat, making tea she forgot to drink and staring at James's phone number. Finally, she gathered enough courage to call him. Her hands shook as she dialed the numbers. When James answered with a simple hello, Emma's throat felt tight with emotion. "It's me," she managed to say. "Emma, I was hoping you would call." James said softly, "Would you like to meet today? We could walk through the village park like we used to." Emma agreed, even though part of her wanted to hang up the phone and pretend yesterday had never happened. Meeting James again would mean facing all the pain she had buried deep inside her heart for 10 years. They met at the park entrance at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Emma arrived first and waited by the old iron gates, watching families with children playing on the swings and couples walking their dogs. Everything looked normal and peaceful, but Emma felt like a storm was raging inside her chest. When James appeared walking slowly down the path toward her, Emma felt her heart skip a beat. In the daylight, she could see the changes in him more clearly. He was thinner than he used to be, and there were lines round his eyes that spoke of worry and hard times. His clothes were clean but old, and his shoes had been repaired several times. "Thank you for coming," James said when he reached her. His voice was gentle, but Emma could hear the nervousness underneath. They began walking along the familiar paths they had explored countless times as children and teenagers. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. Emma felt anger building inside her like pressure in a kettle about to boil. "You just vanished," she finally said, stopping in the middle of the path and turning to face him. Her voice was louder than she intended, and a woman walking her small dog nearby looked over with concern. "One day you were here. The next day you were gone. No letter, no phone call, nothing." James stopped walking and looked down at his feet. Emma could see shame written across his face, but she was not ready to feel sorry for him yet. 10 years of wandering, 10 years of feeling abandoned, 10 years of thinking their friendship had meant nothing to him. All of that pain came rushing back like a flood. Do you know what that did to him? Emma continued, her voice shaking now. "I thought we were best friends. I thought we told each other everything. But you just disappeared like our friendship meant nothing." James walked over to their old bench under the massive oak tree where they used to sit and share their dreams and secrets. The tree had grown bigger over the years, its branches spreading wider and casting deeper shadows. The bench looked smaller, Then Emma remembered, worn smooth by weather and time. "Please sit with me," James said quietly. "Let me try to explain." Emma wanted to keep walking, to leave him sitting there alone like he had left her, but something in his voice made her stop. She sat down on the far end of the bench, as far from him as possible. James was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. Emma noticed they were rough and calloused. The hands of someone who had worked hard physical jobs for many years. "My father lost his job at the factory," James began slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "He had worked there for 15 years. Then one day they told him they were closing down and moving the work to another country. He came home that afternoon and just sat at the kitchen table without saying anything." Emma felt her anger begin to waver, but she tried to hold onto it. She had been hurt for too long to let it go easily. "Within 2 months, we lost our house," James continued. "We could not pay the rent anymore. Then Mom got sick, really sick. She needed medicine and doctor visits, but we had no money for any of it. I watched my parents fall apart. Emma, Dad would sit in his chair all day, and Mom would cry when she thought I could not hear her." Emma's chest began to feel tight. She remembered James's parents as kind, hard-working people who always made her feel welcome in their home. The thought of them suffering made her heart ache. "I was so ashamed," James said, finally looking up at Emma with tears in his eyes. "I could not bear for you to see us living in a tiny, dirty room above the pub on the edge of town. I could not bear for you to see my dad giving up on life, or my mom getting sicker every day because we could not afford proper medicine." Over the following weeks, something beautiful began to happen between Emma and James, like two careful dancers learning to trust each other again. They started meeting every evening after Emma finished work at the library. At first, their conversations were awkward and full of long silences, but slowly the old comfort began to return. Emma would finish organizing the last books on the shelves, lock the heavy library doors, and walk to the small cafe near the church. James was always there waiting for her, sitting in their old corner booth with 2 cups of tea already ordered. The cafe owner, Mrs. Miller, remembered them from years ago, and would smile knowingly when she saw them together again. "It's like watching 2 puzzle pieces find each other after being lost for years," Mrs. Miller told her husband one evening as she watched Emma and James through the cafe window. Emma began showing James how their village had changed during the 10 years he had been away. They would walk slowly through the narrow streets after their tea, and Emma would point out all the differences. The old bookshop where they used to spend hours reading was now a bright computer store with flashing screens in the window. The small grocery shop had expanded and now sold exotic foods from around the world. Even the post office had been modernized with new equipment and faster service. "Remember when we thought this village was so boring?" Emma said one evening as they passed the spot where the old sweet shop used to be. "We couldn't wait to leave and see the world." James nodded, looking round at the familiar yet changed streets. "Now it feels like the whole world to me. All I wanted was to come home." But their favorite places were still there, like faithful old friends waiting for their return. The cafe with its red and white checkered table still served the best hot chocolate in town. The old stone bridge over the small river still had their initials carved into the wooden railing from when they were 15 years old. And the massive oak tree in the park still provided the perfect shade for a sitting and talking about life. Emma found herself looking forward to their evening meetings more than anything else in her day. For the first time in 10 years, she had something to be excited about. She would catch herself smiling while she worked at the library, thinking about something funny James had said the night before. "I used to imagine you living a perfect life." James admitted one evening as they sat under their oak tree watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. Big house with a garden full of roses. Important job at a fancy company. In London. Maybe married with children running round the yard. Emma laughed. But it was a sad sound. My life stopped when you left, James. It was like someone had pressed a pause button, and I never learned how to press play again. She told him about the loneliness she had carried like a heavy backpack for 10 years, how she threw herself into her work at the library, staying late every night to avoid going home to her empty flat. How she had become known as the helpful librarian who knew every book in the building but had no close friends of her own. People asked me out on dates, Emma continued. Picking at the grass beside the bench, there was Tom from the hardware store, and that nice teacher Mr. Williams, and even the new doctor who moved here from London. But I always found excuses to say no. James listened without interrupting. Understanding dawning in his eyes, I kept everyone at a distance, Emma said softly. I was so afraid of being hurt again. So afraid that anyone I cared about might just disappear one day like you did. It seemed easier to be alone than to risk that pain again. We both got stuck. Didn't we? James said, reaching over to gently touch Emma's hand. You stopped letting people in, and I kept running away from everyone who might care about me. As autumn arrived and the leaves on their oak tree began to turn golden and red. James started helping Emma with small projects round her flat. She had mentioned that she wanted to plant flowers in the tiny garden behind the bakery. So James offered to help her prepare the soil and choose the right plants. Working together in the dirt. Their hands muddy and their old clothes dusty, they began to remember who they used to be before life had made them both so careful and afraid. Emma remembered how James had always been good with his hands, able to fix anything that was broken. James remembered how Emma always knew exactly which flowers would bloom best in which spots. This feels right, Emma said one afternoon as they planted bright yellow daffodils that would bloom in the spring. Working together like this, it feels like we're planting more than just flowers, James smiled. The first truly happy smile Emma had seen from him since his return. We're planting hope, he said. But just as Emma was beginning to believe that everything might work out perfectly, James shared news that made her heart sink like a stone dropped in deep water. I can only stay until Christmas, Emma, he said quietly one evening as they cleaned the soil from under their fingernails. I have to go back to Manchester. Mom needs me there. And I have a job waiting at the factory. Emma felt the old familiar. Fear creeped back into her heart like cold water flooding a warm room. Was he going to leave her again? Don't go, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Please don't leave me again. Emma could not sleep that night after James told her he was leaving. She lay in a small bed above the bakery, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar sounds of the village settling down further. Night, the old floorboards creaked below her, and she could hear the distant sound of cars passing on the main road. But all she could think about was losing James again. The next morning, Emma made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of just accepting that James would leave, she decided to fight for their friendship. She had spent 10 years being passive, waiting and hoping. This time, she would take action. Emma knew exactly who could help them. Mrs. Peterson had been the village councillor for over 20 years. She was a kind woman with silver hair and wise eyes who had helped many families work through difficult times. Emma had never visited her before, but she had heard wonderful things about her from people at the library. James, Emma said when they met that evening at the cafe, I want us to go see Mrs. Peterson together. She helps people work through problems, and I think we need help working through ours. James looked surprised. A counsellor. Emma, I don't know if that's necessary. Please, Emma said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. If we're going to be friends again, really be friends, we need to talk about all the hurt we've been carrying. We can't build something new on a foundation that's still broken. James was quiet for a long moment, stirring his tea thoughtfully. Finally, he nodded. If you think it will help, then yes, I'll do it. Mrs. Peterson's office was in a cozy cottage near the village green. The walls were painted soft yellow, and comfortable chairs were ranged round a small coffee table. Books lined the shelves, and plants grew on the window sills. The room felt safe and warm, like a place where people could say difficult things without fear of judgment. Emma and James sat side by side on the small sofa, both nervous but determined to be honest. Mrs. Peterson sat across from them, her hands folded gently in her lap, waiting patiently for them to begin. We were best friends as children, Emma started slowly. But then James left 10 years ago without saying goodbye. And we both got hurt in different ways. For the next hour, they told Mrs. Peterson their story. Emma talked about feeling abandoned and how it had made her afraid to trust anyone. James explained about his family's problems and how shame had driven him to run away. They both cried as they spoke, finally letting out years of pain they had kept locked inside. You both carry guilt that isn't yours to carry, Mrs. Peterson said gently when they finished speaking. Her voice was warm and understanding. James, you were just a young man trying to help his family survive a terrible situation. You did what you thought was best with the knowledge and emotional maturity you had at 18 years old. She turned to Emma, and Emma, you couldn't have fixed his family's problems for him. Even if you had known about them, sometimes people we love face challenges that are beyond our power to solve. Over the following weeks, Emma and James visited Mrs. Peterson every Tuesday evening through their sessions. They learned important truths about friendship and forgiveness. Emma began to understand that James had left out of love, not selfishness. He had been trying to protect her from his family's pain, even though his method had caused different pain. James learned that running away from problems often makes them bigger and more complicated. When we run from our troubles, Mrs. Peterson explained, we often end up carrying them with us wherever we go, along with the new trouble of being separated from the people who love us. The most important thing they learned was that real friendship means accepting people as they are, not as they wish they would be. Emma had to accept that James was someone who had faced terrible hardship and made mistakes. James had to accept that Emma had been deeply hurt by his departure and needed time to fully trust him again. Healing takes time, Mrs. Peterson told them. Be patient with yourselves and with each other. As part of their healing process, Emma and James decided to volunteer together at the village food bank. Every Saturday morning, they would arrive at the small building behind the community center and help distribute groceries to families who were struggling to make ends meet, working side by side. Sorting canned goods and fresh vegetables, they met people who reminded them both of James's family during those difficult years. There was Mrs. Thompson, a widow with 3 young children who had lost her job at the local factory. There was Mr. Garcia, an older man whose pension was not enough to cover both his medication and his groceries. There were young couples with new babies, trying to stretch their small incomes to cover everything their families needed. This feels right, Emma said one afternoon as they folded donated clothes and organized them by size, helping people who are going through what you and your family went through. James nodded, carefully folding a small child's winter coat. I spent so many years feeling ashamed of needing help. I thought accepting charity made us weak or failures, but everyone needs help sometimes. There's no shame in it. through their volunteer work. Emma and James found purpose in their pain. Their own suffering had taught them compassion and understanding that they could now share with others. They discovered that helping people heal from struggles similar to their own was helping them heal. 2. As Christmas passed and winter began to fade away, something wonderful happened in the village. Emma's idea about bringing James's mother to live nearby had taken root and grown into something beautiful. James had called his mother in Manchester and explained everything about finding Emma again, about the counselling sessions with Mrs. Peterson, and about the possibility of starting fresh in their old village. Margaret, James's mother, was tired of the big city and the loneliness that came with living in a tiny apartment surrounded by strangers. When James told her about the small cottage next to Emma's flat that Mrs. Williams was willing to rent at a very low price, Margaret's voice had filled with hope for the first time in years. "Are you sure about this?" Margaret had asked her son, over the phone. "I don't want to be a burden to you or to your friend." "You could never be a burden, Mom," James had replied. "And Emma isn't just my friend anymore. She's family, and she wants to help us both." Spring came early that year, arriving with warm sunshine and the sweet smell of flowers blooming everywhere. The day Margaret moved to the village was bright and clear, with fluffy white clouds drifting across a brilliant blue sky. Emma had spent the morning cleaning the little cottage and filling it with fresh flowers from her garden. When the small moving truck arrived, Emma got her first look at James's mother in 10 years. Margaret was much thinner than Emma remembered, and her hair had turned completely white. She moved slowly and carefully, like someone who had been sick for a long time. But when she smiled at Emma, her eyes were the same warm brown as her son's, full of kindness and love. "Emma, dear," Margaret said softly, reaching out to hug her. "James has told me so much about how you've helped him. I can never thank you enough." Emma felt tears in her eyes as she hugged James's mother. "We're family now," she said simply. "Family helps each other." Over the next few weeks, Emma threw herself into helping James find work in the village. She knew everyone who worked at the school, the shops, and the local businesses because of her job at the library. When she heard that Mr. Davies, the headmaster at the village school, was looking for a new caretaker, she immediately thought of James. "He's wonderful with his hands." Emma told Mr. Davies as they sat in his office surrounded by children's artwork and school notices. "He can fix anything, and he's so patient and kind. The children will love him." Mr. Davies was a wise man who had been teaching for over 30 years. He agreed to meet with James, and within a week, James had his first steady job in 10 years. He would be responsible for maintaining the school building, fixing broken desks and playground equipment, and making sure everything was clean and safe for the children. James discovered that he loved working at the school. The children would run up to him in the hallways, chattering excitedly about their day, and asking him to help them with small problems. When a little girl's shoelace broke, James would tie it back together. When a boy's toy car lost a wheel, James would find a way to fix it. "You understand what it's like to struggle," Mr. Davies told James one afternoon as they watched children playing in the schoolyard. "That understanding and compassion will make you a wonderful teacher someday. Have you ever thought about getting your teaching qualifications?" James had never imagined he could become a teacher, but Mr. Davies's words planted a seed of possibility in his mind. With Emma's encouragement, James enrolled in evening classes at the community college in the nearby town, 3 nights a week. He would take the bus after work and study subjects like child development, classroom management, and teaching methods. Emma and James's friendship grew stronger than ever before during this time. They had both learned through their counseling sessions and their volunteer work that true friendship isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up for each other, especially during the hard times. Every evening after James finished his studies, or Emma closed the library, they would meet under their oak tree in the park. Sometimes they would talk about James's classes or Emma's work with the children at the library. Sometimes they would remember funny stories from their childhood or make plans for the future. "I'm proud of who we've become," Emma said one evening, as spring flowers bloomed all round them and birds sang in the branches above their heads. "We're different people than we were 10 years ago," James replied, "watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. We're stronger now, and we know what really matters." Margaret grew stronger and happier with each passing week. The village doctor, Dr. Mitchell, was kind and thorough in his care. He adjusted her medications and helped her develop an exercise routine that slowly built up her strength. But more than the medical care, it was the love and support of her new community that helped Margaret heal. She began helping Mrs. Collins, who owned the bakery below Emma's flat. Margaret had always been an excellent baker, and she taught Mrs. Collins her special recipes for bread, cakes, and pastries that had been passed down through her family for generations. The end.